This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
All right, what's up, Clanless Future Movement? This is Steven, your host with Phantology Podcast. I have my lifelong friends, Josh and Ryan, on, and we're talking about Jade Legacy by Fonda, the epic conclusion to the Greenbone Saga. This is, if you missed our previous reviews, this is one of my favorite series in the recent years and kind of overall. And Josh and Ryan have been convinced to read it. We were maybe not quite as high on Jade War as I was hoping. So, guys, I'm hoping for some better reactions here as we wrap up the series.
Okay.
Oh no, that doesn't sound very convincing.
Okay, Steven, question. Have you seen Citizen Kane?
No.
Ryan, have you seen Citizen Kane?
No, I know there's lots of like, is that the red?
So-
Oh, wait, no,
No,
never
no,
mind.
no, it's why a lot of people consider it to be like one of the greatest movies of all time. So I watched it a few years ago and I enjoyed watching it. It was a fun movie to watch. However, it was not something that I was super engaged in and like loved everything that like I wouldn't say I like loved the process of watching it or like there's it's weird like I didn't feel like I was super emotionally connected to anything that was happening, but I understood why it was like widely considered to be a masterpiece. Does that make sense? Can you like understand that? That is
Yeah, I
You
mean,
could appreciate it for being like a piece of art almost, like a
yes.
significant cinematic masterpiece, but at the same time you didn't really enjoy it as like a form of entertainment.
Yeah, I think I would have more fun sitting down and watching like one of the good Marvel movies. You know what I mean? Like I would sit down
Hmm.
there and like so
so you're
so
saying that you are a fan of you're not a fan of cinema, you're just a fan of
no,
films.
I think that
But you're a
there are
you're
other like cinematic films that I think I am more of a fan of
mm.
than Citizen Kane.
That's how I
And
feel about Dune.
okay, yeah, I can see that too with Dune. I like the modern movies more. I think they're a little bit more enjoyable. But yeah. Anyway, so that kind of is encapsulates my feeling about this book and this series is I understand why people love it, and I think it did what it was doing really well, but it wasn't exactly my cup of tea, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I want to frame the discussion from my end is like,
Mm.
and I can talk about what hit for me and what missed for me, but I don't want that to take away from like your love for it. And I know that a lot of people love it, and a lot of like, a lot of people rate this as an amazing series, and I think it is. But yeah, not.
You're trying to get ahead of the negative YouTube comments, is what you're saying?
Well, if we get any YouTube comments, yes, but I'm trying to get ahead of more the uh the negative reaction from both my panel members and also Discord people, and also if anybody were to comment on YouTube, yes.
I think I'm similar to more closer to Steven than to Josh. I think I quite enjoyed it and um probably the most out of the trilogy. But compared to the predictions I made at the end of our last review, I was so far off what was gonna happen. So far
What were
off
predictions as far as your enjoyment or just like what was going to happen?
what was going to happen.
Hmm. Do you
So
remember what those were?
Well, the main prediction I had, Stephen was like asked us like, so how do you like foresee, like I think you asked like, why do we think it's called Jade Legacy or something along those lines? What do we think that meant? And I was like, well, um, I think it's gonna be important with the younger generation, and I thought that maybe even oh, I'm blanking on what their oldest son's name is.
Nico?
Um, yeah, I thought he was going to be kidnapped by the mountain and raised by them and like turned against his family using how his uh uncle, adopted father, killed his biological mother.
Mm.
Um and so anyways, I thought that was gonna play into it somehow. I was pretty sure about that. But on the other hand, I was sure that Hilo was going to die based on his past actions, and well, we'll get into that.
Yeah, I remember asking you guys as well if Hilo, we talked about like if Hilo could be redeemed in your eyes based off his actions in Jade War and how his character might grow and to give more a little more nuance to who he was. That can be a larger discussion going forward. Josh, were you going to come in after Ryan's last one?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I don't think that there weren't really any. There was one big twist, or I would say kind of two big twists. But for me, at the end, like I didn't think it really was gonna matter too much for the point of the book whether Hilo lived or died. You know what I mean? Like he had already cemented his legacy as somebody that like kept the old ways alive while kind of ushering the clan into the future. Him and Shay, I think that they kind of were able to be that yin yang kind of duo that was able to do that. That was my read on it. And so almost for that success, it didn't really matter if he lived or died. That being said, it's kind of one of my criticisms is I wish that his death would have been more impactful maybe on the story, and it happened pretty late in the story. So, but like maybe if he would have gone down as more of like a martyr, but instead he was just like, oh, there's like a successful hit on him and he died. You know what I mean?
Well, I
And
mean, they were gonna put a hit. Mata was trying to put a hit on the entirety of like all the Greenbone leaders. Like he prevented the entirety of the
of
uh
both clans being, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, because the other guy was gonna, the leader of that like minor clan was gonna switch allegiances, or he did switch allegiances, and then they were gonna take everybody out as soon as that happened, right?
yeah, I don't remember
And
all the
yeah,
details there,
and then his
but I mean,
perception, yeah, right.
his it was very impactful the way that
But
he yeah.
yeah, yeah, but not, I guess. But like you didn't see. I'm thinking. Okay, I don't want to spoil, but um at the ending of one of Sanderson's first books of one of his series, I think that's vague enough that nobody should get mad at me for spoilers.
Okay.
Do you know what death I'm talking about and how that was very
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking
that
about.
really shaped the ending of that book and the series moving forward? Like I didn't get that sense of like Hilo's death like mattering like that. Whatever, you know what I mean? And they're different characters, different series, da 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 da. But like that was kind of more what I would hope to see from it. So
I don't know. So I felt like Hilo's death was more symbolic than impactful, if that makes sense. It was um it was symbolic of like I think kind of the unyielding green bones, the way of the unyielding green bones like going away because I think Hilo exemplifies like what a greenbone warrior is and like his passion and like his desire to further the clan and like practically giving up his life at points and ultimately giving up his life um and he also shows that in with his actions there at the end, like where he is going against the wishes of pretty much everybody else to attempt to kill Ayatmata. And she of course because she's also the older generation of Greenbone warriors, she's trying to do the same thing. And so Hilo's death and Mata's dismissal is kind of like symbolic of, the next generation taking over
Mhm.
and that they'll be different. So I don't know. I mean, I didn't think it was like as impactful as like, this cascade of events that, ends up with the No Peak clan being victorious over the mountain or anything like that. So anyways,
Yeah, both of the old guards simultaneously were eliminated. One exiled, one Hilo died. I think in general, the maybe the discussion kind of comes back to the framing of this story more as like a wide scope narrative of kind of just like, okay, here's what's happening, and then years later, here's what's happening, and very different than what I don't know what you guys were expecting, but different than Jade City, different than a lot of fantasy novels where it's a tighter narrative and kind of things happen, one after another. It's like a very zoomed out scope, and a lot of it is kind of symbolic, and it's kind of more just like showing the family as a character rather than trying to set up big banger events and set pieces and twists and uh, I can't like I don't know of a great comparison for this type of story structure.
It,
But
it, it
do you guys think of any?
Yeah, it's almost more like I've read a few historical fictions, and it almost feels more like that, like where it'll put a character in the middle of like historical events. I can't think of any rough. I read a lot when I was like a teenager, but like where it would put a character in the middle of like, kind of like historical events, and then it would kind of like narrativize those events, and so the
Mm,
character would be kind of moving through experiencing kind of these historical events, and that's kind of what it
hmm
felt like to me. Was like, oh, let's put the Call family in this situation, then move it to the other situation, etc.
hmm Yeah, I think it felt like it was realistic in a way that a lot of a lot of stories we read, you kind of have this like suspension of disbelief where it's fine that all this big banger stuff happens like one after another within the space of, a confined timeline. And, in real life things don't really work like that. There's like kind of boring time and exciting time and back and forth. This didn't really mess with that at all. It's just like, okay, this is like a fictional real history, and so this is how it's going to go down, and years are going to pass, we're going to plant the seeds here, and then down the line you kind of see what becomes of like good and bad fruit that was planted years ago, and then the next generation kind of rises up and you see how they were influenced by all that. I just think it's a really interesting way of telling a story and showing maybe a more realistic approach on a story like this where it's not all happening right at once, but you still like get a really good sense of here are the causes and effects and here's how it might have like really gone down had this been a real thing.
I will say that the scale of the book or the timeline was much more widespread than I thought it was going to be. Like when like Jade Legacy, like the name, I think it, implies that there's going to be, wider reaching effects, but I didn't recognize that, you know, the younger generation, like Miko and um whatever, man, I can't even remember his brother's name.
Nico, Rue, Jaya was their
Yeah,
sister.
I didn't expect them to become adults at to the point where Nico could become the next call of the clan or leader,
Pillar,
pillar,
pillar of the
whatever. Yeah,
calls. Yeah.
pillar of the calls. Yeah.
Well, of the No Beat clan, but yeah.
hmm
Yeah, I mean,
So it was
hence
surprising, but
Jade Legacy, yeah.
I like
But
the twist.
the twist of just the story structure itself.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that wasn't necessarily a twist. It was more like a twist for me just because I didn't really expect it, but
Mm. It felt to me like it'd be interesting to ask Fonda this, but what was the reason for for setting book three like this? She's probably talked about it, but don't have that offhand. Anyway, it seems to me that this is the story she wanted to tell. She wanted to set up these themes of how cause and effect over years might go down, how the changing guard might what's going to happen here over the years, and it's like this theme of change and the but also like some things stay the same, and how do we interpret this, how do we live with this. I I just felt to me, I think the reason why I really connected with the story so much, two things. One, it just felt so like realistic in terms of, and I guess I'm just kind of repeating myself, but it was very satisfying to read a story that felt like it could be real life rather than, this like narrative type of thing. It felt like it could be real historical events. But also I just connected to the characters so much that by the time the story was ending, it very much felt like this emotional detachment from these people that I really liked reading about over years of their life, getting like a real tight look into who they were and how they've grown. And I mean, not everyone. We can talk about that a little bit because maybe there were some characters in the second half of the story or in the second half of Jade Legacy that were introduced. We didn't quite get as much time with them. But like the mains, like Che and in Hilo, probably mostly those three. By the time you finish this book, you've spent so many you've gone through so many things with them. You've seen them grow up. You've gone through so many years of their life. That really connected me with those characters.
Yeah, but my boy Andon was kind of done dirty in this book in terms of like screen time. We got so much screen time with him in the second book. And I think the second book was my favorite because of that. Like I really enjoyed
Mm,
Andon's story, especially in España. Or wait, what?
yeah,
Yeah, in
Hispania, yeah,
Whatever,
Port Massey.
Port Massey. And then in this book, it was just like, okay, and now he'll come in and kind of make some cameos throughout a few scenes, but I don't know if we ever really even got his viewpoint very much. Maybe a few one-off chapters this book, you know,
Mm.
and and so I maybe again, like it's hard to say, okay, well that's my preference that we would have gone more end in, and so I can't really hold it against the book, but like it was kind of I want more end in, in this one.
I mean, it
Um,
was it was like I think by nature of the fact that you're getting a lot more viewpoints of the younger
but
generation.
that was kind of my criticism. Is like, why are we spending time with this younger generation that we don't really know and sacrificing the screen time with characters that we do know, you know?
Yeah, I think that's fair. That I guess that's just a byproduct of Jade Legacy of what the story is trying to do. You're going to, by nature of introducing this new cast of characters or seeing the young ones grow up. Yeah,
That's where I
there's only
almost
so
think
much
that,
screen time.
yeah, that's where I think that like if you handle it better, like doing it like a first law type thing is like just a, I enjoy that more because it's like to me, I feel like we didn't really get a satisfying story for Andon. You know what I mean? Because we got like a little bit of his youth, a lot of his adolescence, and then like glimpses into his adulthood. And
You don't feel like over the course of those years that like he had I mean, I feel like he grew so much from this really powerful but not confident young kid growing up underneath Hilo, who was very abrasive to him and at one point basically kicks him out of the clan to going off to Hispania all on his own, trying to finding himself there.
yeah, yeah,
And then by the end, he's super confident. He tells Hilo to get the heck out of here when he tries to disown Nico. And, he's part of the whole thing with Shay and Aitmata, which I think was my favorite and most interesting part of the story. Anyway, like by the end, yeah, he is, and what he's like running for like some kind of
yeah.
government
He gave
position
up
at
he
the,
gave up his
yeah,
Jade to yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, those are things that happened. Yeah, but like
But you can't get behind like that story, or you feel like you need just more of him
I just
throughout.
feel like we got so much of him in the second book, and I really grew to like his character, and then I feel like I get told about events in his life in passing, or because he walks into another viewpoint's or another character's viewpoint
Mm,
and does something or says something impactful. And for a while, I felt like okay, this is and in story in a lot of ways. And then the third book, I feel like he was a character in other people's stories, and specifically in like in call and like Kilos and Shays, but then also like their kids. He was like more of a character in their kids' stories who like I that's kind of like an interesting way to do it, but I didn't feel connected
mm.
to them really at all. I felt like I would have rather gotten more chapters with Andon, I guess. And maybe seen the kids grow up from Andon's perspective, which they kind of did at the beginning, but like if it would have been kind of reverse where we see the kids through Andon's perspective and through Shay, get more chapters from like Shay, and Andon and Hilo and get the kids progressing throughout those perspectives, I think I would have enjoyed that more. But that's just my kind of thinking about it, not the story that was told. So
Yeah, I think it's tough because the scope expands so much. Where do you cut? What do you show? Very difficult. Do you feel like, I guess you felt like Hilo still had the same amount of screen time? I mean, for me, it
yeah.
seemed like this book was just kind of a big, like the lens zoomed out and it was the family itself was the story rather than like any individual member.
Mhm.
And in like distances himself from the family in a lot of ways, and he's not really part of the clan as much as others at the end of the story. So I guess it kind of makes sense. But yeah, I mean, maybe we could have seen more of his viewpoint, kind of got into his head at why he was doing that or like what he was thinking at different times.
Yeah, it's just like kind of throughout the second book, we're like, oh, he has this like kind of love interest, and we're kind of like engaged in his like personal life. And then in this book, it's like, oh, yeah, he has a boyfriend that's like kind of serious, and like, we get like one scene where they talk about like if he's gonna attend a clan party, and that's pretty much it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, I don't know.
I think there's
Yeah.
something to be said where like some readers might be dissatisfied with the fact that, the perspective changes and it becomes more macroscopic than in previous stories. And I definitely think that some people might not like that. I did like it. I liked that, it starts to tell the stories of other people and it is still very much in the story. And I don't think I would like the way it's executed in other stories, but in this one I did.
I guess the
Yeah.
alternative to this would be instead of three books, where the third book covers 20-ish years, let's just make it a 7 book series,
Or do
stretch it
like first
on.
or do first law and do two trilogies.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
think that's what Josh, yeah,
Oh, I
that's
see
what
what you're saying. Yeah, have a bit of a time jump in between and then like two real tight narratives. Yeah, I guess it ultimately just comes down to like an artistic choice
Yeah.
there. And I it also could have come down to like maybe Fonda Lee wanted to do other stuff. She
Yeah.
didn't necessarily want to write 6 Greenbone books and wanted to, experiment with other
it would
stories
be a
too.
good question to ask Fonda Lee. Like, um, did she maybe write herself into like a little bit of a corner where she is like booked as like this is a trilogy and I spent so much time telling, the first one third part of the book that I need to fit, or the first third part of the trilogy in 2 books. I need to fit the last 2/3 into one book.
Mm.
Yeah. That kind of is what it felt like.
I
Uh,
I don't know though. I mean, I feel like do publishers really like hold you to no, you said it was a trilogy, like you only have one more? I feel like if it's a successful series, then more
yeah.
often than not, they just say, okay, yeah, add a fourth book. No problem. Add a fifth book. Great.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how many series does that happen? I know that happened in Wheel of Time, which was a bit bigger. I know that happened in Aragon, which was a bit bigger. Um,
Pierce Brown just added another one added book 7 onto
right.
his second Red Rising.
So I
Right.
mean, in my opinion, all of those are bigger than this one. So I guess it's not uncommon. Um, but so I mean, I don't know. I think that yeah, the popularity of the series definitely plays a part in whether or not the publisher is going to let you do that.
Yeah. And she also wrote these pretty fast too, like they're coming out every few years, right? Like they're I think from like
Yeah.
2017 to like 2022 or something, all
Yeah.
three
I
books.
don't that sounds about right. I don't know the exact dates, but we can go with that. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Which is impressive, especially for the quality of writing. And that's why I really do want to put some praise on these books because they're excellent. Like they're excellent books. You know what I mean? Like Jake as kind of a glimpse into upcoming Fantology stuff. Jake's reading first Assassin's Apprentice, and
Hmm.
he's made some comments about how he hasn't attached too much to the characters yet, but he just like it's written so well that he really enjoys reading it. And I feel like that's the case with this series as well. I think the prose were top notch with what she was Fonda was going for. It's not like super flowery and stuff, but I was also always very engaged. It was very cinematic in a lot of ways. The world building was excellent. I felt like I could picture what was going on. Like it was really engaging in how it was written. And so um that was just done really, really well. And I think a lot of my enjoyment came from the actual how it was written as opposed to the plot, you know. So
What was your what was your conclusion by the end as far as Hilo? Both of you were not happy with him at all in Jade War. Didn't feel like there was really like any way for him to be redeemed. What did you think by the end? I mean, I know we talked a little bit about just the impact of his death and whether or not it was is really needed from a story standpoint, but from like an emotional character standpoint, like what do you think? I mean, the entirety of well, not the entirety, but his little wake there as he's dying, and it's designed to really like pull on the heartstrings and make you kind of question, oh, he's done these good things, he's done these bad things, like where do we land on him?
no, well, I was happy
Yeah.
he died. Yeah. I think he needed I said I didn't think it. I think I'm going back on what I said earlier and when he didn't really need to die. I think I think it would have been dissatisfying if he didn't die. I think that he needed to kind of give his life for the clan because he gave so many other lives for the clan that if he didn't die, if
Mm,
he would have just been able to grow old, it would have been pretty lame, you know? And so I was kind of happy when he died.
yeah.
Well, I
Like
mean,
he would have expected any of his green bones to do what he did in that situation. You give his life for really like all of Kekon, like the way of life as they knew it.
yeah, I mean, so excluding the fact that I feel like he needed to die because without him dying, like there wouldn't have been like a true peace between the two clans. If Hilo was alive, he would have tried to dominate the Mountain Clan, like no matter what. Um, and but going back to Steven's question, I still have mixed feelings on Hilo because like from my sense of morality, like what he did was, so bad and like, so horrifying. But then it was kind of weird because I feel like for the rest of the series, none of the characters really viewed it like that. Nobody reacted in the way that I expected them to react, with like kind of horror and, I expected Nico to find out about it and like be like, "You're not my dad, you killed my mom," like type thing. And for
Mm.
Nico to kind of just be like, "Oh, okay, like yeah, yeah, you had to kill my mom," and like just accept it. I was like a
I
little
mean,
taken aback.
but down the road, Nico leaving the clan and everything, you gotta think that that came into that.
Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, it wasn't. I don't know. I mean, I think that played into it a bit, but I don't know. For the rest of the series, it was kind of like that was nobody really viewed it as like a sin of Hilo that much. It was just kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, he did it. Like he probably had to, like that. After all, Nico's with us. Like Nico needed to be here, and so it was weird, like
I
how
mean, they
it
live by very different terms of morality than
right.
you do.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I guess like that's kind of the conclusion I had to come to because I liked most of the other aspects of Hilo's character. I liked how, how he like came around with Nico, he was like so in typical Hilo fashion, just like with Nico turning his back on the clan, just that was like you know, Hilo was so mad about it and like was willing to like kick him out and never see him again and make that passionate decision. And like Andon, of course, talks him down and to the point where he's like, we'll see Nico off at the airport. And then, um, anyways, this is my roundabout way of saying like, I think I liked where Hilo ended up as a character, but I was still kind of a little weirded out in the middle just because my sense of morality was so different than theirs and some of Hilo's
Mhm.
actions.
Yeah, I agree. And I never felt like there was any really comeuppance for Hilo's like earlier actions with his
Mm.
hot-headedness and stuff. Like he didn't really suffer anything for it. Like even though Nico, yeah, he left the clan, but he still came back and was like and was the heir, you know. And and so it's hard to feel like anything that
I don't
Hilo
know. I
did
feel
out
like
of
I mean, you could say that the fact that his other son, Rue, died, that was a direct result of just, clan living, Hilo being who he was, being, you know, uh,
yeah, I wouldn't say that
continuing this conflict for years. Like there were certainly
his
some tragedies
yes.
that Hilo
Lon
suffered. Shay
Lon
being
died, Make
Yeah, Shay
died.
being tortured when being captured and tortured at the end of book two. Like maybe not direct like because you did this, you are punished, Hilo, but it's more just like the result of who you are and how you've been living and what you're trying to do with the clans. Like you're also
Yeah.
going to be subject to hits against you and your family.
I was more thinking of like specifically with Nico and like killing Nico's mom, you know?
Hmm.
Like but yeah, those are all really good points. Like he lost a lot of the people closest to him, in addition to his wife, whose name I'm blanking on, Make Wen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
He basically lost all of his brothers,
yeah,
Lon and both the Makes.
yeah, that's true.
Kept
And
Andon
his
at least. I mean,
and
Andon not really his brother, but by the end
Yeah,
he was kind
and,
of
yeah,
brother.
that's
Yeah.
true.
and a son. And
Yeah.
and that was another one where, you know, it was just hard to feel connected to Rue and Nico, I guess, both of them. So it's hard to really feel the weight of Nico leaving or of Rue dying. Um,
Man, I
so
was so sad when Rue died. I mean,
yeah,
I get what you're saying in that you don't have nearly as much time with Rue as you do other characters. I feel like Fonda does a really good job of connecting you pretty quickly, but compared to other mains, like Rue dying would not is not as impactful as Shay or Andon or whatever. But I mean the fact that he's still kind of a somewhat young kid with his life all ahead of him and he dies in such a senseless way, and just knowing what this is gonna mean for the clan and like it was just really heartbreaking.
And he has
yeah,
such noble ideals too, he's just
Yeah.
and then and it was even more touching like later on where Hilo's like donating to all of these he becomes like very charitable, donating to all of like Rue's
Yeah.
interest
And how
groups.
about Hilo's reaction of when Rue died? Did you think he was gonna fly off the handle and just like go
yeah,
scorched earth? But then he doesn't. He's just like so devastated he can't even. I mean, I feel like Rue dying fundamentally changed him in maybe a direction he was like in his older age, like he was maybe kind of softening up around the edges, but Rue dying just like really changed him quite a lot. Not entirely, but that single thing really altered his character.
It was kind of the catalyst that brought him and Nico back together.
Oh yeah.
yeah. I
So,
I enjoyed. I can't remember when in the narrative these events happened, or like when in the book, I guess these events happened. But it had a flashback to a duel or that he fought with a potential suitor of Shay's. Do you guys remember this? Like he went and
Yeah,
got
it was towards
hammered
the
with the
end of the
makes
book.
in a
Yeah.
bar. But I think it kind of paralleled like one senseless duel with Rue, and then his senseless not.
I think
I mean
I
his
think it was
his
directly before or pretty soon before.
I thought it was pretty close to it, but I think it did a good
Mm,
job of comparing. That his was, I guess, less senseless, but even more malicious. I think from his point, like he basically murdered the guy.
Oh, definitely
Yeah,
malicious. Yeah.
yeah. Like and to show that like okay, he got here and kind of that full circle of like, well, it worked out for him, but it didn't work out for his son, which was
mm.
even more like senseless and yeah. And
I
his son
think it
was
was
kind of
almost like
self-defense, so
he almost like paid the price, for like in his youth, I think the reason, like him being that Greenbone warrior and teaching those ideals to his kids, is the exact thing that led Rue, even though he wasn't a Greenbone, he was still taught those same ideals and acted
Yeah.
like a Greenbone would in that situation, which is what got him killed. And I think
Hmm.
Hilo recognized that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the kind of stuff why I really like the series because those types of things, it just seems like so real to life. Like, you realize the things that you've been teaching your kids and it comes to play and like all these and all the interplays between the characters is I just think it's really masterfully done. And I get the some of the criticisms here of, it's much more zoomed out and maybe we wanted more time with individual characters, but I also really appreciate for what it did do here.
I think it's almost like a better book club book than it is like a personal reading book, if that makes sense. Like, I think it inspires a lot more conversations that I enjoy than
Yeah.
most books, you know?
Well, yeah, it
Um,
makes you think that there's a lot of
yeah.
interesting themes and a lot of just like kind of ponderings about life here.
I really like some of the concepts that are introduced in a lot of like these world built for like fantasy, but in this it's like never mix green and gold for like don't have your
Hmm.
politicians hold Jade. And then in this book that it explores is like green turning black with tar, and that was kind of interesting how he like
Yeah.
how Hilo, a younger Hilo, would have killed Tar, after his actions because he's like, this is necessary. But like at that
Hmm.
point in his life, Hilo's going through. He's just had so much death he can't kill it. He can't kill
Right.
Tar. And then later on, it was interesting with Andon going and being like, Hilo didn't send me here, but just so you know, we need that it would help the clan if this guy dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Tara's like, okay, like this is kind of how I redeem myself. Not to the point where I can ever go back and return home, but I can still give my life for the clan.
Hmm. Yeah.
So anyways,
Yeah. So
I
so good. And that's like
yeah.
very much like a B-list character in the series, but
Hmm.
yeah, I think that really came together really well. So my favorite part of the book was the KJA bombing and the aftermath of that. I think it's the biggest, I don't know, it's probably like the longest section of the book straight through. And the I don't know. There's a lot to talk about there because one, you see that Aitmata has been betrayed and she's like looking after being stabbed. She's looking around the room. No one's there to help her. She has no friends. She's kind of realizing like she is reaping what she's sown as well, and that like she has no family, no one loves her, unlike the Kauls. I think that's another interesting comparison by the end of the book. But you see it here maybe for the first time and then the building gets bombed. There's all this like, who's alive, who's dead, and then Mata being rescued by Shay and Andon and being brought back to, well, not brought back to life, but being stabilized. And then they realize that Hilo's still alive. They kind of all realize it at the same time, and they're like in the room looking around, like, oh snap, like since
Yeah.
Hilo's still alive, like we really ought to kill you right now, and we could,
Yeah.
but yeah, like that whole sequence was just like 10 out of 10. Loved
Like
it.
goes from saving their life to being like, should I kill them? Like
Yeah.
probably, but it defeats, I don't know. Yeah, it was a really interesting turn of events, um and interesting how it's like Shay was basically like, yeah, I should kill Ayatmata, but I'm like, really thinking through all of the repercussions of her actions. And I think the dynamic between Shay and Mata and their meetups are maybe
Hmm.
like the most interesting in the book. Like you said, it was probably one of the best parts of the book with her saving her, and then later on that comes back to help them, right? When Mata agrees to um
Save Shay. But
save
yeah,
Shay from.
go to bat to Shay for Shay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it does a really good job of being a foil for Aitmata, like Shay, doing things that Aitmata would never. And
Hmm.
I think we see that she did make the right decision with that, with how unstable the Mountain Clan ended up being, and it
Yeah.
really would have, like, whether sorry, um, whether Hilo was alive or dead, like even if they knew he was alive, it was still their right decision to save her, because it would have still descended into all out war. I think if Shay would have
Mm.
been not there to keep everyone in line on them in the Mountain Clan.
Kind of the devil you know type
Yeah,
situation.
like I think we get enough peeks behind the curtain that like we see that she's just like barely keeping everything in line without like
Hmm.
everything descending into chaos
Right.
in the mountain. So
And frankly, like through all the years of Jade Legacy, the Mountain Clan and the No Peak Clan, like, I don't know, they cooperated decently well. There wasn't, I mean, sure, there was some violence, but it wasn't the warring of the previous two books. I think they kind of came to a bit of an understanding. There was a lot of, politicking back and forth, but it seemed like most of the conflict was like Kekon versus the rest of the world, as the rest of the world comes to try to influence and make use of Jade, and also the clanless movement, and this thought that the clans are bad in general. But I mean, Mata and Hilo, they kind of, I don't know, they played nice for most of it. Not, at the end, they Mata did not play nice, so she tried to take everyone out. So you could argue that, well, okay, was Mata really ever on board, or did she just like, realize that this was the state of things? But
I
overall,
I think
I
she
agree with
had
you, Josh. I think it was the right move to keep her alive.
yeah, I think she had kind of a savior complex where she saw herself as the way forward, and that was the only play she had in order. So I think she thought that she would need to be the one to come out of it and hold everything together. Otherwise, it was all
Mm,
going to descend into chaos anyway. So it's kind of like a kamikaze attack. Like, okay, I'm either going to, you know,
yeah,
go out or maybe not kamikaze, like, but go all in. Like in poker, you go all in with your chips, and it's
sure.
like, and maybe she was bluffing, like she didn't have a full good enough hand to do it, but she knew she needed to. Otherwise, she was going to slowly be chipped away and
I
not
wonder how
stand.
much of that was I'm Mata, I killed all my family. I've been in this, like, this is my identity. Like, I've been running this thing for my whole life, versus I really am the best thing for Kekon, and like I need to be in
Yeah,
charge in order to hold things together. Like, do you think she realized kind of, the back of her head a little bit, like, the calls, they kind of have this family thing. People seem to respect them. Like, maybe they're doing a better job, or did she like never even, did that not ever, clue in to her, and she
it,
was just like, this really is the best.
in her
I got to be in
conversations
charge.
with Shay, it felt like the latter, where she felt like she was the best and that she would be able to get it. Like she had a very high opinion of herself. But again, we don't. I guess we don't really know, like, behind the curtain
Yeah,
all
you
that
don't
much.
get a whole lot behind the curtain with her.
Yeah,
Isn't there a short story with with Aitmata before she
Uh,
becomes the
yeah,
pillar?
there's two short stories. I read them both, but oh man, I should
I
have
didn't
brushed up
read
on
them.
that. I don't remember. That sounds right, but I don't remember. I need to Google that really quick.
yeah. I knew that there was one short story, but I didn't know who it was or what it was.
I
There's one
think
that's there's one called The Jade Setter of John Loon, which is just kind of like a side character story with a few cameos, just fun, but not really all that big. But there is one more. Hmm, okay, well, let us know. Maybe I feel like that's dang. That sounds right, but I can't. I'm not sure.
um but the other aspect of Aitmata and Shay's discussions was, I think, being women in a men's world. and predominantly men's world. And
Mm.
I think it was kind of like I viewed it as, like nobody would like give her the respect. Like she saw what was good for the clan, but nobody was gonna let her take the chance to get the clan where it needed to be, and she kind of needed to force her way there. Whereas
Yeah.
Shay, I think she's had like a similar view, but she also saw the value in working with others and bringing them around to her way of point of view.
Okay, it's called Jade Shards, and there's four short stories, and one of them is indeed Aitmata prequel. There's also a
Okay.
Lon story and a Hilo and Wen story and a Shay story.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Man, nothing with Andon, my boy Andon, done dirty again.
I mean I like Andon a lot, Josh. I want to say going back to my like initial review, I think I ranked the characters. Andon was my favorite character. Yeah, he's awesome. His growth that I talked about before is fantastic, and by the end he's so confident. He's going over to Hispania and making deals with gangsters like Remy and not being cowed in the face of being bullied around. And then he's an awesome doctor and making all this medical progress. And then whatever he's doing by the end, I don't remember like what exactly he's doing political, but yeah, been very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. This one, so kind of going more of a meta conversation, Stephen, and you can redirect us if you want, but um, who would you recommend Greenbone Saga to in terms of, like I'm struggling with that. I can think of a few people, but not a
I
ton,
feel like I feel like it has a really similar narrative to Game of Thrones in terms of
Mm.
massive family, two essentially warring families, massive POVs, a lot of politics and intricacies going back and forth. The only difference, I feel like, I guess going back to our previous conversation, if Fonda wanted to, she could have stretched us out to 6, 7 books, had it be this like really long epic thing, and then the comparison would be even stronger. But the vibes are very, like the story structure is very similar. Obviously, the fact that it's more like urban fantasy is quite different, but I like it for Game of Thrones fans.
Okay. I could see that because it's funny. I was thinking that the person I would recommend it to that I know is Hayden, my brother-in-law, who's been on the podcast a few times, and he's a huge
Mhm.
Game of Thrones fan. So yeah, that's interesting. I could see that. I like that. So if you're like, okay, I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones, but I really like it mainly for the family dynamics and the politicking. That'd be okay. Greenbone Saga, right
Yeah.
up your alley.
Or
Yeah,
people who like gangster type of stories. Like if you're watching what's the
like
one
the
with
like the Godfather or
yeah, Godfather or Peaky Blinders, stuff like that, where it's just like the
but
crime family.
do you think the fantasy aspects would throw people off, or they would be like, oh, this is a fun twist on the
But
crime
it's not
genre?
like the fantasy isn't, I mean, obviously, well, I was gonna say the fantasy isn't too in your face, but I don't know. That's kind of hard to say when it's the Jade it rules everything. But I don't know. It almost seems like a it's not a real like magic wandy fantasy. It's almost more like oh, we've got this technology that only these certain people can use, and it's very modern. I don't think it's super. Like the fantasy is there, but I feel like it's very approachable, even if you don't really like fantasy.
Okay, fair
So
enough. I
thinking
agree.
about the members of Fantology who aren't here, Jake and Ben, it just seems like the type of story that Jake would like and Ben would not like.
He read some of these, right? Or did he read the first one?
I think you read the first one. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ben did.
I think
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
right. I think you're
I,
right, Ryan. I feel like
it,
Jake would like this.
it just seems like a little bit more like politically involved, and like there's kind of like more Cold War-ish type, like there's not a lot of like direct fighting between the clans. it's more like fighting through like shell companies like in different countries and
Hmm.
um I don't know. I don't know why I don't necessarily think Ben would like it other than the fact that he didn't finish the
I mean,
trilogy.
I can because I think he would be a lot like me. Of like, I think Ben and I both are pretty character driven, and I still think that the characters are. I'm not gonna say bad, but the weakest part of the book in terms of like,
Man, I still don't understand this take.
man, I don't know, just in terms of
I guess we've talked
I don't
over
know.
it,
Yeah, we've talked over it,
to
but
ad
yeah,
nauseum, but I
yeah,
just, yeah,
yeah.
I'm willing to die on this hill, Josh. Sounds like
I
you are too, though.
yeah, I mean, I don't like saying it because they're really well done. Again, it goes back to my Citizen Kane take where, for what it is, it's really well done. But for somebody that just really wants to be in a character's head and like be able to really empathize and know what they're going through and stuff, there are moments where you really get that, and because you see this character's growth that hits hard, but
Yeah.
it's not a fundamental part of the story where every time you
Yeah.
pick up the book, you're
It
like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, what character do I get to really dive into right now? It's am I going to read an event that's impactful for a character that I like? You know what I mean? Do you see that kind of difference there?
Yeah, yeah, agreed. It's not a first person story. You're not getting their emotions. You're getting what's happening to them, and then you're kind of reading between the lines to see like, okay, this is how this
Yeah.
person has developed over the years, and like this is how this impacted them, this is how this changed them. But
Which is a
uh,
really cool way of telling a story. But I think that's why it didn't hit as strongly with me and what probably wouldn't hit as strongly with Ben. So
and I feel like there's similar vibes in a Game of Thrones. Like if you take, Jamie Lannister from beginning to end, you don't necessarily you're not like I mean, I guess he
yeah.
probably gets more point of view chapters and there's more pages, etc. But you're still not getting like his first person POV, but instead you're getting like all these things that are happening and the way that that's changing him. And I mean, substitute many other Game of Thrones characters as well. Although I think Jamie's a great one for the change that he makes. But I like someone like Hilo, he changes so much, but at the same time, he's still fundamentally himself. I think that's just like so brilliant and so true to real people. Where I mean, if I look at myself or people around in my life, like I see who they were 10 years ago, and they're the same person, but they've also changed, and it's just like this, I don't know, thing about human nature that I feel is so accurate in these books. So yeah, clearly I'm willing to go to bat and die on this hill for the series. Uh, yeah, any other
It just shows
final? Yeah, Ryan.
I think it's just you know, a good endorsement of the book as a whole when you're willing to go to bat for it and what you like about it.
Yes. I wish I'd done a reread. I mean, it hasn't been that long, so
I,
I
and
feel like I'm up to date on what happened, but I mean, I would still be down to read these again.
and that's the thing. I think that these would hit harder on a reread, having like kind of having an idea of where characters go. You, I think that this one would really
Mm. You could
benefit
probably
from a
pick up on
reread.
more hints and
Yeah. Yeah.
realize, they did this and this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we didn't talk about Barrow at all. What was your take on this character? I mean,
Man, I hated
he gets
Barrow.
he gets a lot of time on screen,
I
but
was
he's kind
thinking,
of this outlier in that, we don't care about
man,
him as
I
much.
hate weakest part of the series, honestly. If he would have done something actually impactful, that would have been like, oh, like I kept waiting for kind of a grand plan to come
What do
together
you
with
mean
Barrow.
actually impactful? He killed Lon. He killed Rue.
Well,
He
he
didn't
didn't
kill
kill Rue,
Rue.
but he would. I mean, I get like, okay, we want somebody on the street level that the clans have stepped on, you know, a
Hmm.
perspective as kind of observing all of these events, and maybe, but he needs to be more sympathetic in order to like, I couldn't, okay, here's my thing, and maybe you guys
He's
can
a
help me
total
work through this.
rat. Yeah, there's really
Yeah.
not much redeeming about him.
Okay, help me work through this because from what I would think that the character would be like, okay, here's the you can go either way. Here's the negative impact that the clans have on society, where this person that's like maybe not good person, but not terrible person, just gets stepped on and beat down over and over and over again until he turns into a cynical, bad, terrible person.
Mm,
Or here's um, somebody that is really bad and would take over society if the clans weren't there. Like the clans are preventing people like what did geez, I just blinked on his name. Like him
Barrow?
from yeah, people like Barrow from like overtaking Kekon. You know what I mean? Like I could see it going either of those ways, and I don't feel like it went either of those ways. Instead, we just get a really unlikable character that witnesses events, and I didn't like it. I don't
yeah,
know.
I
Yeah,
honestly, yeah, I didn't like him as much as the stuff with the Call family. Really unlikable person. Sometimes you question like, he's not really doing all that much. I think the intent was to show, like you said, a street level view of what's happening through a common person's eyes. But I don't know, maybe to just like let you make your own decision on are the clans good for Kekon or not. I think that's kind of the lens that Barrow gives you into the world.
I just realized the other I mean, this isn't really the whole point of his character, but the beginning of the series opens with Barrow and some other person trying to steal Jade, and then Long
Right.
ultimately like letting Barrow go. And
yeah,
then the end, not the very end, but towards the end, Barrow kind of yells at Nico and is like, "I killed your dad." And
he's
like
like,
and Nico ultimately is like, you know, you're not worth my time, that type of thing. So it's interesting how like father and son both ultimately spare the
Hmm.
life of this guy who may or may not deserve it.
It begins and ends with the twice lucky, and I think Barrow's involved in both,
Yeah,
right? So,
Barrow's like a taxi driver picking up
and
somebody at
then,
the twi
yeah,
oh, is he picking up Andon? And he's
at
like,
the very end, yeah, I was talking with Andon.
okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't know. That doesn't really answer your question. It's just like a cool similarity I noticed.
I think there's a lot of artistic choices
Hmm.
in this series, and this is probably one of them. I think that's probably a wrap. So, Barrow's whole clanless future movement did not work out. Best of luck to, I don't know, the next citizen uprising. If you want to join Fantology, you can, or if you want to talk with us and join the Fantology community, you can join our Discord. Invites are in the episode descriptions below. Uh, Brian, do we have I guess we have a next, we're gonna just start doing some Realm of the Elderling stuff, right? I'm trying to convince you to read Life Ship. Jake is reading Assassin's Apprentice, and then Josh are
Yeah,
reading Life Ship. It could be some Robin Hobb coming up.
yeah. And what has inspired this? And are there any world events?
Inspired us to start reading Robin Hobb.
Yeah. Like is she coming out with a new book? Maybe not in the realm of elderlings, but in general.
She is writing a new Fitz, or she's writing another series potentially. She has announced that related to Realm of the Elderlings, but I think specifically this was just kind of like a interest was expressed and books were checked out and folks started reading, and then momentum was going, and we're doing it now. So
All right.
finally gonna have some Robin Hobb reviews in the near future.
Between you and me, you think Jake is gonna like it?
He's liking Assassin's Apprentice decently so far, it seems like. Um, I, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like he'll be. I don't think this is a series he's going to love as much, but I hope he's like at least liking it.
I don't think he's gonna like Fitz as a character. That's my prediction.
He's a frustrating character.
Yeah.
He's a tough one, but yeah. Okay. Well, till next time. See you later.
All right. Fun discussing it with you, Steven. Good
Peace.
recommendation.
All right.